HBO Max's Velma is an adult animated reimagining of the Scooby-Doo franchise, focusing on Velma Dinkley as the central protagonist. Marketed as a comedic and satirical take on the beloved mystery series, the show attempts to modernize the characters and introduce darker, edgier themes. However, its execution has been widely criticized for its poor writing, unlikable characters, and unnecessary deviation from the original source material. While Velma had the potential to be an intriguing and fresh take, it ultimately fails to deliver a compelling or enjoyable experience. The series follows Velma Dinkley, now portrayed as a highly cynical and self-absorbed high school student, as she investigates the disappearance of her mother and a series of murders at her school. Along the way, she interacts with reimagined versions of the classic Scooby-Doo characters, including Shaggy, now a nerdy, love-struck best friend with an unrequited crush on Velma; Daphne Blake, a self-absorbed, mean girl who has a complicated relationship with Velma; Fred Jones, a spoiled, dim-witted rich boy who serves as comedic relief; Scooby-Doo, completely absent from the show, replaced by a government experiment later in the series. The show mixes murder mystery, high school drama, and social commentary, aiming for humor but often falling flat. What Velma gets wrong. 1. Unlikable characters. One of the biggest criticisms of Velma is the unlikability of its main cast. Let's start with the biggest issue: the main character herself. Velma Dinkley, the once lovable, smart, and quirky detective, has been completely rewritten into a self-absorbed, obnoxious, and borderline mean-spirited protagonist. In Scooby-Doo, Velma was always the intelligent and level-headed one, but in this show, she's turned into someone who constantly insults others, acts superior, and somehow still wants the audience to root for her. Velma Dinkley is rewritten as a sarcastic, rude, and self-absorbed protagonist who often mistreats those around her. She lacks the intelligence and charm that made her a beloved character in the original Scooby-Doo. One of the biggest complaints is that Velma seems to hate everyone around her. She belittles Fred for being rich, mocks Daphne's past, and treats Norville, this show's version of Shaggy, like he's beneath her. And yet, we're supposed to believe she's the underdog we should sympathize with. If a show wants us to care about its protagonist, it needs to give them redeeming qualities. But Velma is written to be as insufferable as possible, making it nearly impossible to connect with her. Next up, let's talk about Fred. In most Scooby-Doo adaptations, Fred is the brave leader of the gang, always coming up with plans and leading investigations. In Velma, however, he's reduced to a rich, spoiled, clueless man-child who can't even cut his own food. Every joke at his expense is about how privileged, stupid, or useless he is. Fred is reduced to an incompetent buffoon whose entire character revolves around being privileged and unintelligent. Look, making fun of a character is fine if they have some level of depth. But here, Fred is treated as a walking joke with no redeeming qualities. Instead of being an actual character, he exists purely to be ridiculed, which feels less like comedy and more like lazy writing. Then we have Daphne and Norville. In this version, Daphne is reimagined as an Asian American girl with a tough, rebellious streak. On paper, this isn't a bad idea, but instead of making her an interesting, well-developed character, the show turns her into an arrogant, shallow, and sometimes even violent person. The depth she could have had is lost in forced romantic drama and weird backstories about being an orphan. Daphne is portrayed as arrogant and manipulative, with little redeeming qualities. And then there's Norville, aka this show's version of Shaggy. Now, making Norville black isn't inherently a bad choice, but instead of keeping his fun-loving, goofy nature, they turn him into a timid, lovesick pushover who spends most of his time simping over Velma, even though she treats him like garbage. He doesn't even like snacks, let alone get high like the classic Shaggy. The change doesn't feel natural. It feels like the writers wanted to prove a point, but forgot to actually write a good character. Shaggy is stripped of his fun-loving, laid-back personality and turned into a pushover who obsesses over Velma. It's like they went out of their way to include everyone just to offend everyone. The lack of a genuinely likable or relatable character makes it difficult for audiences to connect with the show. 2. Poor comedy and forced social commentary. Velma heavily relies on meta humor and social satire, but instead of being clever, the jokes feel forced and condescending. Comedy is subjective, sure, but Velma fails in one fundamental way. It tries way too hard. Instead of letting humor come naturally from its characters and situations, the show relies on constant fourth wall breaks, self-aware jokes, and outdated pop culture references. It's like the writers Googled funny jokes for Gen Zanyi and threw them all into the script. The show frequently breaks the fourth wall, but instead of insightful commentary, it delivers shallow observations about modern society. It mocks classic tropes from Scooby-Doo, yet it fails to establish its own identity, making it feel like it despises the franchise it's based on. The humor often comes off as mean-spirited, relying on exaggerated stereotypes and awkward dialogue rather than wit. This is what I mean. Instead of writing an actual joke, the show just points out something about itself and expects a laugh. It's like a comedian saying, "Look, I'm on stage right now," and waiting for applause. It's not comedy, it's just annoying. Rather than cleverly addressing diversity and social issues, the show shoehorns them in without meaningful exploration, making them feel performative rather than impactful. Now, let's talk about the real issue: Velma's obsession with social commentary. Listen. Shows have always included social messages, sometimes subtle, sometimes direct, but the best ones do it naturally, through storytelling. Velma doesn't do that. Instead, it constantly shoves its woke humor in your face, to the point where it feels like the writers are lecturing you instead of entertaining you. Here's a perfect example. Instead of making Fred an interesting character, the show just reduces him to a stereotype: the clueless, rich white dude. Is that really the best they could do? Compare this to how other modern shows handle social issues like The Boys, which satirizes corruption and politics while still being entertaining. Velma wants to be a smart, self-aware show, but ends up sounding like a Twitter rant. Look, satire can be great, but Velma doesn't know when to stop. Every scene feels like it's trying to make a point, to the point where the show forgets to have fun. Even if you agree with its messages, the delivery is just exhausting. It's like being stuck in a room with someone who won't stop complaining about everything. It's tiring, not entertaining. This is why people loved Scooby-Doo. It had charm, personality, and humor that anyone could enjoy. Velma, on the other hand, tries to be edgy, controversial, and woke, but in doing so, it alienates its audience, and that's why it failed. 3. Lack of mystery and weak storytelling. For a show supposedly about mystery solving, Velma fails to create a compelling or engaging plot. The central mystery, Velma's missing mother, and a series of murders takes a backseat to unnecessary high school drama and Velma's personal issues. The storytelling lacks tension, suspense, or logical progression, making it difficult to invest in the unfolding mystery. Scooby-Doo, the heart of the original franchise, is completely removed, eliminating the team dynamic and fun that made the classic series enjoyable. Instead of feeling like a genuine mystery series, Velma struggles with identity, bouncing between adult humor, high school romance, and lazy satire. A Scooby-Doo show without mystery is like a detective without a case. It just doesn't work. Velma promised a fresh, modern take on the classic mystery series, but instead, it delivered a confusing, unfunny, and poorly written story that barely even qualifies as a mystery. One of the biggest reasons people love Scooby-Doo is the mystery. Every episode had a case: strange disappearances, creepy monsters, unexpected twists, and the gang had to work together to solve it. It barely even tries. The show starts with a murder mystery, but instead of focusing on solving it, we get endless self-aware jokes, forced social commentary, and random side plots that go nowhere. Where's the investigation? Where are the clues? Where's the suspense? A good mystery keeps you guessing, dropping hints along the way that make the audience feel engaged. In Velma, the so-called mystery is pushed to the background, while the show spends most of its time making bad jokes and mocking its own characters. Another huge problem? The storytelling is all over the place. Instead of crafting a tight, well-structured narrative, Velma feels like a collection of random subplots thrown together. One minute, Velma is dealing with her missing mother. The next, she's flirting with Daphne. Then we're watching Fred act like a clueless idiot. And somehow, all of this is supposed to be a mystery show. A mystery is only as good as its detectives. But in Velma, the characters aren't just unlikable, they're downright annoying. Velma is written as an arrogant, self-centered know-it-all. Fred is a walking joke. Daphne is selfish. Norville is a lovesick pushover. None of them feel like real detectives, let alone interesting characters to follow. Compare this to the original Velma, who is smart, determined, and passionate about solving mysteries. This version of Velma doesn't even like mysteries. She just stumbles through the plot while making fun of everything. How are we supposed to care about the case when the main character doesn't even seem interested? Even if you somehow made it through the mess of bad jokes and weak storytelling, the way Velma handles its mystery is just lazy. There are barely any real clues throughout the season, and when the twist is finally revealed, it feels completely random. There's no clever build-up, no aha moment, just a rushed explanation that makes you wonder why you even bothered watching in the first place. This is how you do a mystery. You let the audience piece things together. You reward them for paying attention. Velma does none of that. Instead, it treats its story like an afterthought, as if the writers never actually cared about making a good mystery in the first place. What Velma could have done better? A more faithful reimagining. The show could have modernized the franchise without completely discarding the spirit of Scooby-Doo, giving Velma a witty, intelligent personality, while keeping the fun mystery-solving dynamic would have been a better approach. Better character development. Rather than making every character unlikable, Velma could have allowed them to grow and develop naturally, showing depth beyond stereotypes. A stronger mystery focus, a series focused on clever detective work and eerie mysteries, with humor that enhances rather than undermines the storytelling, would have been far more engaging. Less forced social commentary, addressing modern issues naturally through storytelling instead of forced dialogue would have made for more meaningful impact. Final verdict. A misguided attempt at reinvention. Despite its potential, Velma fails to capture the charm, fun, or intrigue of the original Scooby-Doo series. Its unlikable characters, weak writing, and misguided satire alienate both old fans and new audiences alike. While it aimed to be a bold and edgy reimagining, it ultimately feels like a parody of itself, lacking both the intelligence and humor needed to make it work. Final score, 1 out of 10. A frustrating misfire that could have been so much better. Would you like me to add anything? Like a comparison to other Scooby-Doo adaptations? What do you think? Did Velma deserve the backlash? Or is there something redeemable about the show? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into pop culture, fails, and wins. Until next time.